I see a lot of conversation in the human design community about that talks about the chart through the lens of causation. In fact, I've recently came across somebody who's doing this in the context of the physical body. And they'll say they say things like, well, if you have this, then you're gonna be, then you've got a design for gallbladder surgery, or you have a design for heart attacks, and you have, so looking at the chart as a hard diagnostic tool where you say you have this in your chart, therefore you're going to have this in your life. Don't do that, because the chart is not that kind of a tool. And so never use the chart that way, because that's really looking at it causation, as a causational force. Your chart does not predict whether you're going to be rich, broke, poor, healthy, vital. Your chart is the mechanics of how you operate. It's not what you are, it's how you are. When we talk about correlation, you can say, and I'm comfortable saying, when I see certain things in a chart, I know that from an archetypal perspective, it makes you vulnerable to certain things, right? So I will say, if I see somebody that has, say, the 50-27 defined, that's the channel that connects the spleen to the sacral. And then they have the gate 29, that's the gate of devotion or commitment, and an open solar plexus. It's easy to see that behaviorally there, we have a pattern of feeling responsible, that's the gate 29, and the channel 50-27, feeling responsible and committed to keeping the people in your life happy, because you have that open solar plexus, right? So it feels good when everybody around you is happy, right? So sometimes I call that, well, first of all, it's a configuration oftentimes for codependent behavioral choices or partnership choices. And sometimes I see that as a factor that oftentimes correlates to the metaphorical themes of breast cancer. Now, I say metaphorical themes and correlating because I'm not saying if you see that configuration in the chart going, oh, you're going to get breast cancer, because that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that sometimes when we look at the story of breast cancer, beyond the physiological pieces, that sometimes in the story that is breast cancer, oftentimes it's a lack of self-care because you feel overly responsible for taking care of everybody else's feelings, right? And so that's the difference between correlating versus causing, and being really mindful of it. When we talk about manifesting or the energies that create, first of all, there has to be a critical mass there, right? So if you have a thought, it doesn't manifest instantly, because oftentimes it's a thought that's existing in a spectrum of correlating thoughts, right? So if you have, we'll look at the shadow aspect of that first. So if you're saying, I'm going to manifest $1 million by Friday, right? And you have that thought doesn't manifest instantly, because probably associated with that thought are an innumerable number of thoughts that are like, no, you're not. Where are you going to get that? How are you going to get that? You're not worthy of that. That's not possible. That, all of those thoughts are not always happening on the surface level, but they're probably also happening in conjunction with that thought. And so that thought can't actually create until you reach a critical mass of thoughts that match that thought. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, I think because of that, it does give us a certain amount of forgiveness and an awareness that creation also happens over time. I would say theoretically, you probably could have a thought and instantly manifest it. But really what's happening is we've got to get a whole bunch of stuff aligned and correlated internally. And because we live in this very slow, linear, third-dimensional world, the universe also has to sync a bunch of stuff up, right? So if you're going to get $1 million instantly, we have a sort of a regulating body of collective thoughts around that, right? So I could say, and if I mean, this is hypothetically possible. I could say I'm going to have $1 million right now. And if I had enough critical mass and I was able to suspend the entire belief system of my cultural narrative, money could drop out of the sky for me, right? But the reality of it is we have it kind of set up that money has to show up in a certain way. Like I might have to get a check, and that check's probably going to have to come from somebody else's bank account. And all those other factors have to come into play. And so there is the sort of the element of time that goes into that correlation versus causation. I think that element of time is also really interestingly built into the emotional solar plexus or the creative center, right? That we are designed, if you look at the nature of our design, that we are designed to work over time, not instantly, unless it's a survival thing, right? The spleen is pretty instant. Run from the bear is a very instant thing. But creating something is a process that does, generally speaking, take time. And so there is really a lot of forgiveness built into that creative process.